All right, it looks like we are live. Welcome everyone. Good to see you here. Happy New Year. Um this is this is a big one. I'm excited that we are having this critical conversation honestly around what happens when your pastor is on the news, makes the headlines. This is happening in real time and frankly has been happening for sure over the past several weeks. I want to be clear in this topic of when the pulpit makes headlines, how churches should respond. This is really not a commentary on whether something was right or wrong. It's not about theology or intent or personal character. I really want to address the issues that are unique to my work as a church attorney, right? So I'm talking about governance matters, fiduciary duty, risk management, communications, and legal exposure. So I just want to acknowledge this moment. Over the past weeks, we've seen pastors make headlines for very different reasons, right? So we've seen a pastor removed and then repositioned, a pastor charged with sexual misconduct with another man who was his adjutant or armor bearer. That case was just filed a couple of days ago. We've been dealing with a dress that has gone viral and TV appearances and other pastors speaking in one way or the other, sometimes for, sometimes against, right? But whenever these kinds of issues happen, when the church leader is making headlines, I get the questions from churches asking the question of like, what are we supposed to do now? So today I really want to talk about the churches that are the many people, right? So you might have one pastor who is the subject of lots of discussion, lots of conversation on TV and on shows and all that. But then there are the thousands of people who are in the pulpit, who are in the pews, right? Who are a part of this ministry. You have other leaders, other elders. Hi, glad that you all are here. What are those people to do, right? So I really want to talk about what churches should focus on when leadership becomes public news. So I want to start with what not to do, right? Because these are the things that I've unfortunately seen happen and they don't help at all. So we don't want to issue reactive statements. I've been in the position where I'm the person writing the statements, right, for the churches that I work with. You want to make sure that you don't let social media dictate governance decisions. You don't want to confuse public opinion with legal obligation, right? So I really want to focus on the legal obligation side. Noise is not the same as risk, but sometimes it hides real risk. And that's what I want to cover. So, first of all, let's cover what the board's role is in all of this because we've seen a lot of activity. And I really want to focus on the fiduciary responsibilities that church leaders have. And those responsibilities don't go away because the pastor's in the headlines, right? So, in fact, I think those responsibilities become even more important to know and to manage. So, I want you to just, be very aware. Hi, thanks so much, Rhonda Anderson Johnson. Good to see you. Okay, Lakeisha Bryant, you're a sitting bull. I understand. Well, I'm glad that we're having this conversation. So, when we talk about the fiduciary responsibilities, we're talking about three specific duties that the law expects of people who are in a leadership role. So, one is the duty of care. What does that look like in this instance? Well, it's a duty to pause. You want to make sure you assess, you want to make sure you gather facts. You want to make sure that what you do is for the protection, for the care of the church. I mean, yes, we absolutely do care about the leader or that person who's in the headlines. There should be ministry for that person as well. But really, your duty is to care for the church. And sometimes that can get lost in the realities of how these things play out, right? So we've got to make sure that we are caring for the church while these headlines are hitting. And that is that duty of care that people who sit in a fiduciary role, if you're a church leader, that's you. That's your responsibility. And then there's the duty of loyalty, right? That is to protect the church. We want to make sure that we focus on protecting the church and not spend all of the energy on personalities, because then the duty that we have to care for the church can get lost. And then there's the duty of obedience. So what do the church's bylaws say in these situations? I'm waiting. Right? What did the church bylaws say? Does the church have policies that address these kinds of situations? That is very important. And often the key questions that the board should be asking is this a legal issue? Is this a reputational issue, or both? Does this incident trigger any policies? Right? And then you want to make sure that you understand who speaks for the church. Who is? I know that I always say pastors have the power of the mic, right? They're right there with the microphone. But ultimately, when you get into these kinds of issues, who is the person who's the spokesperson for the church? Who's speaking on the church's behalf in this issue when the perhaps the pastor is the person who's under ridicule, right? And then what documentation matters right now? What documentation do you have? Is there already a policy about how to handle media, for example? You want to make sure that you have these things in place before you need them. And when it comes to headlines, there's a reality that headlines can often expose weak governance. So, what do I mean by that? Um, this is an example that we can be referenced generally, right? So media attention comes to a church, and I do want to just point out um, that church is private property, right? So the whole idea of I'm gonna put Miss Abby in timeout. The church is private property. So what happens at the church, it is one of those realities that we want to make sure that we protect the church. I've been in situations where, the church that I was working with was notified that it would be picketed for various things. And a part of what we work on is making sure people understand, like, it is um, the church is private property. It is a place of where people have the right to secure the church itself, right? So we want to make sure that there is safety in the church. And media attention often can reveal where there's unclear authority, where there's missing policies, where there's blurred pastor or board roles, and ultimately where there's a lack of crisis control, right? So we want to make sure that I'm going to ban this user. So just give me 1 second on that, because the devil is busy, but God is great. So really, the headlines don't create the governance problems, but they often can reveal them. And that's why I want to make sure that we're having this discussion, that all of the focus doesn't go on the personalities. And then the church is left in a place of confusion of, like, what do we do? Hi, Cynthia. Good to see you. Wondering what the church should do, wondering how to handle these issues. I feel like I wasn't really seeing voices speaking to the church and to the good of the church. And so I really want to make sure that there is clarity around how do we care for the church in these situations. Again, the headlines don't create the governance problems, but it can often reveal them. As a preventative takeaway, I want to make sure that we shift from reaction to prevention. So churches, I always say don't want to try to learn how to swim when you're thrown in the water, right? And that's really kind of where it is right now. You don't want churches to be trying to build governance systems in the midst of a crisis, right? Don't want to be building a system of how to manage the media when you're in a media firestorm, right? These situations, thank you. There are so many people who are getting calls, they are getting media requests. I mean, it can be bizarre and wild and crazy, right? You want to make sure that you have a system in place in advance. And then regular legal education matters. You want to make sure that your leadership team automatically knows what to do because they've been trained, they've been given the tools, the insights, the necessary education, legal education, right? Not talking about law school like I went to, but a part of what I get to do. That's really why I created Faithful Foundations membership, is to be able to share with people, to give them the insights that they need, the tools that they need, right? And you want to have ongoing guidance to prevent reactive mistakes, because when you're acting in a reactive way, that can often trigger making mistakes, right? So these moments really remind us why churches need more than good intentions, right? They need to have clear governance. Who's on your board? Have they had regular training? Are they prepared for these kinds of moments? And are they prepared, honestly, to have the hard conversations even with leadership when these kinds of situations arise? So again, when we talk about what we've seen on the news just in the past weeks, um, and just a couple of days ago, as I mentioned, there was a lawsuit filed against a well-known church leader for sexual misconduct. And frankly, there have been many other examples of these kinds of things against other pastors. Well, where is the board in those situations? Does the board feel prepared to handle these tough moments? Is the board informed? Do they have access to ongoing legal guidance? Because again, it can be very difficult when you're looking for support in the midst of um, these times of difficulty. So, a big part of what we do, and why I created the Faithful Foundations membership, is designed to help church leaders think through these issues before they become public or urgent. So, I really want to make sure that churches understand that they don't have to figure this out alone, especially when the pressure is on and when things become public. We don't want to be in a situation where um, we are having a hard time of knowing how to manage when the pulpit makes the news, right? This conversation is not about personalities. It's not about opinions. It's not about social media reactions. It really is about process, about governance, about responsibility, about protecting the church in challenging times. So, thank you all so much for your comments. I see you. Thanks so much. Brittany, Pastor Simpson, great. Good to see you. Hi, Sister Ruth. Bless you. So thank you all so much for joining me. Hey, Kenosha. I'm glad that you're here. Yeah, definitely go back and watch this. It's a wild time that we're living in, and I really want churches to feel supported, to know that you're not alone. I really want church leaders to understand that it's okay for you to address these issues internally, right? I want you to be prepared to address these internally, because moments like these are really a reminder that headlines aren't creating governance problems, but they often can reveal them, right? Churches generally don't get in trouble because they didn't care. They get in trouble because they weren't prepared for these kinds of issues, or for this level of legal scrutiny, or difficult decisions to be made in real time. So I love being able to support churches. Definitely, if you're not in the membership, we would love to have you. ErikaCole.com is where I can be found. You can certainly learn more about what we do there. So again, ErikaCole.com. I'm so glad that you all joined. Hi, Cavell. So appreciate you. Great to see you. Hi, Pastor Pettis. Good to see you. I'm glad that you're here. Yeah, we've been talking about just the issues that have been front and center. And as I said in the beginning, I'm not here to vote on, say yes to the dress, right? The dress has made headlines for weeks, but I am very concerned about whether we talk about the dress issue, whether we talk about the pastor that's with the sexual misconduct, or the pastor that was removed from the pulpit and then subsequently brought back in. There's just been so many examples of challenges in the church. And I want to make sure that we, as the body of Christ, are prepared to govern ourselves well, right? To lead well through these moments. So when the pastor's in the headlines, who is managing what's happening in the church? A lot of times we're seeing that sometimes even internally there are attacks, and we want to make sure that, yeah, exactly, priorities versus distraction. So we're going to ban this user and remove that comment. But yeah, so we're really wanting to address these issues with care and concern, and I'm so glad that you all have been here. If you didn't get a chance to be here from the beginning, I definitely hope that you catch the replay. And I love you. I appreciate you. We know that the work of the Lord has to prevail, right? And we want to be able to make sure that we stay on mission because the world needs what the church has to offer. All right. Blessings to you. Hi, Deborah Miner. Great to see you. Thank you so much. God bless you all. All right. Bye bye.